The key didn't fit. Darius jammed it into that deadbolt so hard the brass whined, nothing. When the door swung open, I stood behind it with the calm of a woman who'd already buried her mercy. Behind me, Daddy stepped into the hallway, arms folded like a deacon guarding the offering plate. Darius's bronze face went gray from the temples down. He'd signed away everything at that notary's desk and ain't even read page 1. "It's Daddy's house now," I said. "And baby, I meant every syllable. But I need to slow down because if I start at the end you won't understand the weight of what that moment cost me. To make sense of how I ended up standing behind a door my own husband couldn't open, you'd have to rewind about 11 months, back to a Tuesday evening in October when the air inside our split level in East Point still smelled like the cinnamon candle I'd lit after dinner, and I still believed, Lord help me, that love was enough to keep a marriage from rotting from the inside out. I remember because I'd just come home from my second shift at the distribution center off Camp Creek Parkway where I managed inventory. 19 people under me. 680,000 square feet of warehouse floor. A tracking system I'd rebuilt from scratch after the old software crashed 6 Christmases ago. Spending 3 weeks on my knees between server racks while everybody else ate leftover pound cake and watched football. My supervisor once told me I thought like a chess player 5 moves ahead always. Funny how I couldn't see the one move happening right under my own roof. That Tuesday I walked through the front door, set my bag on the kitchen island next to a Tupperware of leftover greens, and the house greeted me the way it always did, with silence and the low, endless hum of central air. Darius was sitting in his recliner, the one with the cracked leather armrest he refused to replace, scrolling his phone while some football recap murmured on the television nobody was watching. He didn't look up. Didn't say welcome home. Didn't ask about my shift. 9 years of marriage and we'd stopped greeting each other somewhere around year 7, like 2 people sharing a waiting room who'd run out of small talk. The Lori seasoning was still out on the counter from where I'd made smothered pork chops the night before. A satin bonnet sat on the bathroom doorknob where I'd tossed it that morning. Everything felt ordinary, and looking back, ordinary is exactly the temperature at which things start to die. The phone rang at 9:17 that night. I know because I was loading the dishwasher and the microwave clock was right at eye level, its green numbers glowing like a dare. It was Mama Lorraine, Darius's mother, and the second her voice bled through the speaker my shoulders locked up like somebody had threaded piano wire through them. Mama Lorraine never called to chat. Mama Lorraine called to collect. "Nia," she said, stretching my name into 3 syllables that each sounded like an accusation. "The 8th is coming. I need the mortgage payment." I dried my hands on the dish towel slow, buying myself one breath. "I'll handle it, Mama Lorraine. Handle it." 3 words that had cost me 9 years of paychecks, 2 missed vacations, and a knot at the base of my skull that never quite untied. Because here's the thing nobody outside our little arrangement understood. The house Darius and I lived in, this sagging split level with its water-stained ceiling and the draft that crept under the back door every winter like an uninvited cousin, it wasn't really ours. Mama Lorraine had sold us her old place at a so-called family discount when she upgraded to a newer condo across town in Cascade Heights. The deal was simple. Darius and I would split her new mortgage payments 50-50, while we lived in the old house rent-free. Fair enough, right? Except Darius paid his half for exactly 8 months. Then it was the truck payment killing him. Then he'd catch up next quarter. Then he just stopped mentioning it altogether. And I kept writing the checks because Mama Lorraine's voice on the phone made the bones behind my ears ache, and silence was easier than war. 9 years. I paid Mama Lorraine's mortgage for 9 full years by myself every single month on top of our own utilities, groceries, and the little emergencies that never stop coming. A busted water heater in February, new brakes on my sedan in June, a root canal with no dental coverage in August because Darius's job didn't offer benefits and mine barely covered me. I kept a spreadsheet on my work laptop, every payment logged, every date stamped, every receipt scanned. Not because I was planning anything then, just because numbers made sense to me when nothing else did. At the warehouse I could stand in front of a wall of mismatched shipments and untangle the whole mess in 15 minutes flat. At home I couldn't untangle a single conversation with my own husband without it knotting tighter. Darius had a way of making every discussion feel like I was the one being unreasonable. If I brought up the payments he'd lean back in that recliner, cross his arms and say something like, "We got a roof, don't we? That's because of my mother." As if Mama Lorraine had handed us a gift and not a leash. As if I hadn't been the one yanking that leash tight enough to keep the whole arrangement from snapping. Meanwhile, Mama Lorraine treated me like hired help who also happened to share her son's bed. She'd call on the first of the month, never the second, never with a please, her voice carrying a particular vibration somewhere between a dental drill and a smoke detector that made my stomach rise into my throat. Darius would sit there while she berated me through the speakerphone, picking at the cracked armrest of his recliner, saying nothing. Not once in 9 years did he say, "Mama, she's doing her best." Not once. And every Sunday at Greater Mount Calvary, Mama Lorraine would sit in the third pew, church hat tilted just so, clapping her hands during praise and worship like she wasn't the same woman who'd called me trifling the night before. Bless her heart. The fracture started on a Friday in late spring. I came home from work and my body simply refused to go further. I sat in the driveway for 28 minutes, engine off, hands on the wheel, staring at the garage door with its peeling paint and the rust stain shaped like a bent elbow. Something behind my ribs had shifted, a load-bearing wall quietly giving way. I walked inside, set my keys on the counter next to a Tupperware of cold greens I hadn't had the energy to put away, and told Darius I'd quit my job. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You what?" I told him again, slower, like explaining a return policy to a customer who won't read the receipt. I was tired. Not sleepy tired, dissolved tired. The kind where your marrow feels like powdered chalk and your bones hum with a frequency only God and your mattress can hear. 9 years without a single vacation day. 9 years of doubles and overnights and Mama Lorraine's razor wire phone calls and Darius's magnificent talent for sitting in that recliner like a king on a throne made of dust while the world burned around him. I told him there would be no mortgage payment this month. The color left his face in stages like watching a Polaroid develop in reverse. First the cheeks, then the forehead, then even his lips went the pale gray of old chewing gum. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what happened at work. He asked, "What about Mama's payment?" And my chest went cold and still, the way a lake freezes, surface first, then all the way down. What followed was the ugliest month of my marriage. Darius turned into a carbon copy of Mama Lorraine. The same shrill pitch, the same jabbing finger, the same way of pacing the kitchen like a dog on a short chain. He called me a freeloader, me, the woman who'd been paying every bill in the house since before he stopped pretending to try. One night he slammed his fist on the table hard enough to rattle the salt shaker off the edge, and when it shattered on the tile he just stepped over the mess and kept going. I stopped sleeping in our bedroom. I'd wait until his snoring rattled the hallway, then take a blanket to the couch, pull it over my head, and lie there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional tick of the baseboard heater cooling down. My spirit didn't take to that house no more. Everything in it smelled like his resentment. Stale cologne and something sour underneath, like milk left out too long. My friend Tasha had left for Savannah and given me her house key to feed the cat. Some mornings I'd leave before Darius woke up, drive to Tasha's quiet little ranch house, water her plants, sit on her back porch with a cup of coffee and the smell of jasmine drifting off the fence, and just breathe without the taste of somebody else's contempt coating my throat. It was on that porch, watching a cardinal land on Tasha's bird feeder, that the idea first came to me, not as a plan, not yet, but as a question I let myself ask for the first time. What if I stopped pretending this house was mine? Because the house was never in my name. Not one letter of it. When Mama Lorraine arranged the deal 9 years ago, she transferred the deed to Darius and only Darius. I'd asked about being added once early on, when I still thought asking politely could change things in this family. Darius had shrugged and said it was a formality, that we were married, that it didn't matter. Mama Lorraine had said nothing at all, which was its own kind of answer. So for 9 years I poured money into a property I had no legal claim to, like watering a garden planted in somebody else's yard. The spreadsheet on my laptop told the whole story. 86 monthly payments, every one from my checking account, totaling just over $76,000. Not a cent of it bought me a single square foot. I sat with that knowledge on Tasha's porch for 3 days, turning it over like a stone in my palm, before I picked up the phone and called Daddy. James Big Jim Monroe is not a man who wastes words. He listened to everything on the phone that evening. The payments, the deed, Darius's 8 months versus my 9 years, Mama Lorraine's condo mortgage, the screaming, the fist on the table, the salt shaker in pieces on the tile. When I finished, the line was quiet so long I thought we'd been disconnected. I could hear the creak of his porch swing down in Macon, the low hum of cicadas in his yard. Then he said, "How much is the house worth?" I told him. He said, "I'll be there Thursday." And he was. Daddy drove up in his old Ford with the paint oxidizing along the hood, parked in Tasha's driveway, and sat across from me at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a pen he'd carried in his shirt pocket since retirement. We didn't hug first. That's not how Big Jim operates. He writes things down, draws lines between them, and finds the crack in the wall. Within an hour he'd sketched out a plan so clean it made my teeth ache. The beauty of it was that it used Darius's own greed as the hinge. Darius was desperate for cash. Mama Lorraine was calling daily now, her voice climbing octaves like a gospel soprano gone wrong, throwing around words like default and credit destruction. Darius needed money fast and he didn't care where it came from. So Daddy would offer to buy the house. Not all of it, just half the assessed value paid in cash secured by the property itself, with everything notarized and legally binding. To Darius it would look like quick relief. Problem solved. Mom off his back. He wouldn't read the fine print because Darius never read the fine print. He didn't read the fine print on Mama Lorraine's original deal. He didn't read the fine print on his truck loan. He certainly wasn't going to start now, not with cash fanned out on a notary's desk like a hand of cards dealt in his favor. But here's the part one haven't told you yet, the part that kept me up the night before, staring at Tasha's popcorn ceiling with my pulse ticking behind my eyes like a second clock. Before Daddy ever sat down at that kitchen table, I'd already done something Darius would never think to do. I'd gone to see a lawyer. Not a big firm, not downtown Atlanta. A small family law office in a strip mall on Campbellton Road, wedged between a nail salon and a tax prep spot. Her name was Simone Pratt, and she had reading glasses on a beaded chain, a coffee mug that said, "Not your honey," and a voice so calm it could talk a storm out of the sky. I showed her every receipt, every bank statement, every text message where Darius acknowledged I was the one making payments. Simone looked at it all, took off her glasses and said, "You're not on the deed, so you have no ownership claim. But you do have a paper trail that proves unilateral financial contribution to a marital asset. If he sells and you're still married, you have standing to negotiate, or to make sure the new deed includes protections for you." So that's what we did. Daddy's purchase agreement, drafted by Simone, included a clause buried in paragraph 11 granting me exclusive occupancy rights to the property for as long as it remained in Big Jim Monroe's name. Darius wouldn't read paragraph 11. Darius barely read paragraph 1. All he'd see was the cash. I lay in Tasha's guest bed that night and pressed my palms flat against the mattress, trying to stop the trembling. Not fear. Something closer to the vibration you feel standing on a train platform when the express blows through without stopping. The force of something enormous already in motion that can't be called back. I laid it out for Darius the next evening over reheated chili at the kitchen table, keeping my voice flat, almost bored, the way you'd explain a return policy to someone who just wants their refund. Daddy would put up cash, half the home's assessed value, in exchange for the deed. Darius could use the money to pay off Mama Lorraine's mortgage, cover his truck, whatever he wanted. Darius's knee was bouncing under the table so hard the chili rippled in the bowl. "And your pops is cool with this?" he asked. "He wants it notarized," I said. "Everything official." Darius rubbed his jaw. I could see the math behind his eyes, not real math, not the kind that accounts for consequences, but the simple, hungry arithmetic of a man who sees a pile of bills and stops thinking past the grab. "Set it up," he said, and something behind my sternum clicked into place like a deadbolt sliding home. 2 days later we sat in a notary's office on Jonesboro Road that smelled like old carpet and toner ink. The leather chairs groaned beneath us. Daddy arrived in a pressed flannel shirt with 2 banded stacks of cash in his jacket pocket. The notary, a heavy woman with bifocals and a slow blink, walked Darius through every page. He nodded at each one without reading a single line. When she pointed to the signature block, he scrawled his name so fast the pen skipped. Daddy counted out the bills. Darius snatched them, riffled through the stack. He tried again, jammed it harder. The brass whined against the new lock and gave him nothing. When I opened the door, his face cycled through confusion, then irritation, Then something colder as he saw Daddy standing in the hallway behind me with his arms folded across his chest like a man guarding a doorway he'd paid for, because he had. "Your dad changed the locks?" Darius said, his voice cracking upward at the end. "It's Daddy's house now," I said, and I watched those words land the way a stone lands in still water, the surface breaking outward in slow, irreversible rings. His pupils shrank to pinpoints. His mouth formed syllables that didn't connect to sound. Daddy stepped forward. "The deed transferred 3 weeks ago," he said, voice low and level, the way a man speaks when he's choosing not to yell. "County Recorder's office. It's done." Darius shoved past me. His palm hit my collarbone and I stumbled back into the wall, shoulder blade cracking against the drywall hard enough to leave a dent I'd later run my fingers over like reading Braille. Daddy caught my arm before I fell. Then he turned to Darius and his voice dropped to a register I hadn't heard since I was a child and a boy down the block had made me cry. "Touch my daughter again and the next conversation happens with the deputy present. Leave." Darius's eyes swung to me wild, searching for some crack in the wall he could pry open. "You tricked me," he hissed, and his breath was sour, the way milk smells when it's turned. "I explained the terms 3 separate times," I said. "You nodded every time. You signed every page. You took the money and didn't even count it twice." He opened his mouth, closed it. His face had gone the color of old newspaper left in the rain. Behind him, the evening light through the screen door threw long shadows across the hallway floor. He backed out onto the porch, his boots scraping the concrete, and the door clicked shut between us. But I wasn't finished. See, Darius thought the house was the whole play. He thought I'd spent 9 years being quiet because I was weak. He didn't know that the morning after the notary signing, while he was out spending his cash on Jordans and catfish dinners, I'd driven back to Simone's office with a manila folder thick as a hymnal. Inside was every page of my spreadsheet, 86 payments printed, highlighted, and annotated, along with a certified letter addressed to Mama Lorraine. Not a threatening letter. Not a petty letter. Professional one. The letter stated, in clean language Simone had drafted, that every mortgage payment Mama Lorraine had received over the past 9 years had come exclusively from my personal checking account, that Darius had contributed nothing after the first 8 months, and that enclosed was a complete accounting with bank statements to prove it. I mailed it certified, return receipt requested, the way I'd ship a fragile pallet at the warehouse, tracks signed for, no room for anyone to claim it got lost. 3 days after Darius backed off that porch, my phone rang. It was Mama Lorraine. But for the first time in 9 years, her voice didn't carry that smoke detector frequency. It was quiet. Deflated. She didn't call me trifling. She didn't demand money. She said, "Is this true, Nia? All of it?" And I said, "Every receipt is in the envelope, Mama Lorraine. You can check them against your own bank records." The line went silent for a long time. Then she said something I never expected to hear. "He told me you two were splitting it." 9 years. 9 years that woman had looked at me like I was beneath her son, and the whole time Darius had been telling her I was only paying half. He'd let his own mother believe he was carrying weight he'd set down after 8 months. Mama Lorraine hung up without saying goodbye, and I heard later from Tasha, who heard it from a cousin who attended Greater Mount Calvary, that Mama Lorraine showed up at Darius's buddy's apartment where he'd been crashing, walked in without knocking, and read him so loud the neighbors 2 doors down turned off their television to listen. I wasn't there for it. Didn't need to be. The receipts spoke for themselves. I stood in the kitchen that night after Daddy had driven back to Macon. The cinnamon candle was burned down to a nub. The faucet dripped its patient rhythm. The central air hummed its same low note, except now it sounded different. Not like background noise but like the house breathing with me finally for the first time. I thought about the spreadsheet still saved on my laptop. 86 payments mapped out in neat columns like a story only numbers could tell. I thought about Simone's clause in paragraph 11, quiet as a loaded spring. I thought about Darius's face when the key didn't fit, and I waited to feel guilt or triumph or something loud and clean. What I felt instead was something smaller and harder to name, like setting down a suitcase you've carried so long your arm forgot it was heavy until the weight was gone. My shoulder blade still ached where it had hit the drywall. My jaw was sore from clenching. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and Fabuloso and the faintest ghost of peanut butter toast. I rinsed my coffee cup, set it upside down on the rack and turned off the kitchen light. Tomorrow I'd start looking for work again. Tomorrow I'd call Tasha and Savannah and tell her the whole story over the phone while she gasped and clapped and said, "Child," after every other sentence. Tomorrow there'd be 100 small things to figure out. But tonight, for the first time in 9 years, every square foot of silence in this house belonged to me. I leaned against the counter in the dark, pressed my palm flat against the cool tile, and let the quiet hold me like something I'd earned. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I truly hope it stayed with you even just a little. If you enjoyed it, I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. And if something in this story reminded you of your own life, a moment where you finally set down a weight you've been carrying too long, please share your experience down in the comments. I always read them, and your stories matter just as much as mine. Finally, if you could rate this story on a scale of 1 to 10, that would mean the world to me. Take care of yourselves and I'll see you in the next one.